The last time anybody went under 2 hours on Bear Canyon Loop was, I think, in 1983. If somebody in 2020 or 21 can go under 2 hours on Bear Canyon Loop, I'll be very, very, very impressed.
There is a possibility to go under 2 hours. Just everything kind of has to go right, I think, for that to happen.
Today I actually did a Bear Canyon loop just to try and see what my bearings were, and I got a 210 and road shoes.
I think it'll be as exciting of a run as I've had since the last big race, which was, it'll be almost about a year ago. This might be the best year to attempt it.
Now I just gotta train.
TR's founder, Ken Young, got a faculty job at the University in Atmospheric Sciences and immediately was eyeing the mountain ranges around Tucson and thinking about developing runs in those ranges. Ken had already done some remarkable running, things like a 100-mile run on a track indoors. He posted his best marathon, which was, I think, on the order of a 2:23.
He wanted to introduce local runners to trail running. And he would take different runners on different runs, like Dennis Stonehawker, the famous story that he told me millions of times, where they got up in the snow, practically froze to death.
And one of the routes that they devised was a route that goes up the Bear Canyon drainage on the trail. Hops the ridge and comes down and out Sabino Basin and Sabino Canyon Road. It's by far the flattest and easiest of the original Tucson trail runs that Ken laid out.
Because he was the record keeper for long distance running for the Athletics Congress, and because he's a statistician and he's a meteorologist, he put all of that information together. And then also he became very familiar with TopoMap, and he had done that in Colorado. So he put the whole package together, put out the newsletter, wanted to introduce people to trails, and he started taking times. He would be the race director and he always ran it too, which was kind of funny. We would sign up at the beginning. He wanted our age, he wanted the tread of our shoes, he wanted a description of what we were wearing, he wanted to know who an emergency call person was if one of us didn't make it back alive or whatever,
These were races. On the out and backs, he came up with this system where you had to have a wristband with a color and a number and leave the wristband at the top, and the guy or girl behind you would take your wristband and leave theirs to prevent people from cheating on his routes. I've done sub 2 hour Bear Canyon loops more times than anybody else we have records of. I came to Tucson in the summer of 1978. I visited here, I knew about the mountains, and I knew I wanted to run in the mountains. I was positive of that. I ended up going on a hike with some friends up into the Rincon Mountains. We camped at Juniper Basin, and I said to myself, okay, I'm gonna get up in the morning and run up to the top of Mica and back down. I got about as far as Cowhead Saddle, and it was really fun, and I was really exhausted and realized there was no way in the world I was gonna make it up to Mica.
Phil Stanforth, who was involved with the running club at that time. He invited Ken to give a talk on trail running. And he explained how you should never look at your feet when you're running. You should always look so many yards down the trail to make sure you knew where you were going and what you were seeing. And that way you wouldn't fall, presumably. And that was my introduction to trail running. The way he presented it, it sounded like it was fun. He made it sound like a lot of fun. And as it turned out, it also was very competitive, but I didn't know that.
I heard rumors of this guy, this atmospheric sciences professor, Ken Young, who was putting on runs in the mountains. And I got a hold of Ken, and he said, yeah, show up at the Espero Canyon run at Sabino Canyon. There were 3 other people when I got there. It took me 5 hours. At the top out, we saw Ken's footprints going 3 different directions in the snow, couldn't figure out, and then Jim Shea and I figured out how to do it. I whacked my knee, the worst I've ever whacked it. When I was done, I was exhausted. It was the longest I'd ever been out in my whole life. I loved it. I got to do more of this.
My first trail run was Bear Canyon. It was 226, but I remember Paul saying, we're gonna go up Cardiac Hill. I still not sure what he was referring to when he said Cardiac Hill, but the whole thing was hard to me. I thought I was on Cardiac Hill the whole time.
But then Ken's regular series was starting up in the fall, and I was focused on the idea of Bear Canyon Loop. Did it for the first time, had to walk on what I think is the last hill that might be what Gene says they called Cardiac Hill. And it took me 3 hours and 18 minutes, and it's like, oh, this is hard.
I really have fallen in love with Bear Canyon and Sabino Canyon. This is Tucson's Grand Canyon. It's a shame that more people don't actually get out and enjoy it because it is absolutely gorgeous, especially at sunrise or sunset where you're getting different colors. TTR, it was a little bit difficult to gain access because as just a runner in town, you wanted to run with TTR. You almost had to qualify. The list of the runs, it wasn't common knowledge. So you actually had to know a TTR member and get permission essentially to come run one of their races. But when you did come, you better be ready to run.
It was a very intense day. I ran as hard as I could. I was like the 3rd finisher in a smidge under 2 hours. Of course, that should tell you that there were 2 guys in front of me who were significantly faster than 2 hours.
Because Ken had always also been quite competitive and very interested in times of other people because of the record keeping, he started saying first woman, first man, age group records, trying to give people recognition for their accomplishments. And then, of course, we all got kind of drawn into it, and it became quite competitive.
My first official race with TTR was in 1981. And it was a special race because Thom came out that year. And he was a world champion. He was a cross-country world champion. And so when I saw him, I knew my chances of winning were essentially nil.
I'd run sort of against Thom in foot races, not that we were in the same league. I very distinctly remember in the Sun Run, which was 15K at the time, that I was running as hard as I could, and Thom came up past me, chatting and laughing with people he knew, because he'd started at the back and was doing it as a fun run and was running faster than I could at my fastest. But on the day he decided to show up for Bear Canyon, I looked over and I thought, oh, well, I know I can't run as fast as Thom, but I'm going to try and do my best as long as I could.
The main focus of me that spring was training for the World Cross Country Championships. Even the American record on the roads wasn't my focus. I just happened to be in really good shape and, kind of took advantage of that one. The point being, I was in shape, I was focused, I was ready to go.
So, Bear starts out with the 2 miles of road. And I was running as hard as I could to keep in touch with him on the 2 miles of road. And by the time we got to the trail, I was fried. And I didn't see Thom after that.
I had never raced Bear Canyon before or since. I ran it though a lot. That was a typical training run for me. I did that for a long run a lot. And at various paces, I would run hard, I would run easy, run with friends, run it on my own. And that's actually a key part to this, is that I knew that trail really, really well. I had run the trail very hard to the top before, but that's the only time in my life that I ever pushed it all coming down. And even then, I didn't really plan on going all out kind of thing. I think I just kind of got rolling down and kept it rolling a little bit.
The first runner off of the trail, of course, was Thom Hunt. He was kind of flying. He didn't look like he was breathing hard. And I said, oh, you must be out for just a run on Phone Line or something. We have the Bear Canyon run going on today. And Thom said, well, yeah, I'm in it. And I looked at my watch, and I said, really? I didn't know what else to say.
On the road, I probably ran that way harder than I would normally run, because normally when I would run that in a training run, I'd get to the road and I'd pull the plug and basically just jog in from there, because I didn't need to pound, down on the cement. But that day, okay, they're keeping time, so I ran it a little bit faster.
The guys were just so good. These were incredible athletes, and I was just amazed at how good they really were. Basically, I got schooled.
3 or 4 weeks later, I set the American record on the roads for 10 kilometers. And ran 28:12 on the roads just a few weeks later. Then the month after that, I finished 8th at the World Cross Country Championships. And then a couple months after that, I ran a lifetime best 13:26 for 5,000 meters too. So at that time in my life, I was very, very fit. That 1981 spring, from January through May, is probably about as good a period as I've ever had in my running career. So to say I was fit is an understatement.
But what I took out of that race is that I'm going to have to build my endurance, and I'm going to come back the next year. And basically, I thought about this for quite a while, and I trained specifically for Bear Canyon for probably about 6 months. I really developed my endurance. I would spend 3-4 hours out there on the trail, and so there were so many technical areas. And so if I felt like I could have run it faster in a certain area, I would just stop, walk back, and I'd run it over again. Sometimes I'd do that 2 or 3 times. And I did that for the whole trail sequence. And so when I went into the race, I knew every single rock on that course, essentially, because I had lived out there. And this was a serious deal for me. I really wanted to do well. On Bear Canyon, you really have to go out on the fast and the downhills, because you can't make up time pretty much on the uphill. That's what Thom Hunt did in '81. He just took off like a rocket. And so I wanted to do the same thing, and just running as fast as I can, uncomfortably fast for about a half an hour. My favorite section of trail is the section above Seven Falls. It's just gorgeous. So my goal in my race was to hit that section steady, but not too hard. And I could feel the guys on me. I knew that I was probably only about 30 seconds ahead as I'm kind of coming out of Bear. And there's a little flat section there. They're about 2 minutes of running before you actually go over the ridge. My strategy was, if they were pretty close to me, what I was going to do was I was going to hit them hard right there. I'm going to put this major surge on it. So about 2 minutes before cresting the ridge, I put the surge on, and then I kept it going. Just out of control running on the downhill section to the basin. Literally running as fast as I can at this point. And I did fall down a couple times, but nothing too serious. At Sabino Basin, I slowed down just a little bit because I was running literally as fast as I could run. I continued hard until I got to the asphalt. And then I looked at my watch, and I knew I had about 24 minutes, somewhere in the 24-minute range. So I had two goals going into the race. First, I wanted to win, and second, I wanted to go under 2. I knew I had my goal at that point because I could just run 6:15 mile pace. And then I looked up on the trail to see if I could find Ross or some of the other TTRs, and nobody had started the switchbacks yet. I thought, this race is over. I'm going to win the race and I'm going to run under 2. I got almost to the finish, but I was just getting ready to crest Bonito Hill. And then for some reason, I looked around to see what was going on behind me. And darned if Ross wasn't 15 seconds behind me and he was coming up Bonito Hill. I couldn't believe it. This guy, he just ran 5-minute miles to close on me. And so it was an amazing race. And then when I crested Bonito Hill, I put the hammer down. I probably ran like 4:45 mile pace the last 3/4 of a mile or so. And then I think I ended up winning by about 30 seconds or so. So it was an incredible race. It was one of my best races I've ever had, actually. It's so technical and so difficult of a course that when you accomplish something like Bear Canyon and you run a good time, it's something that you remember your entire life. When you came to TTR and ran one of the races, it's almost a little bit nervous, like you're going in for your final at school, because that's the kind of intensity they brought. I mean, these guys were incredibly gifted runners. And at the time, I was just a teenager. And so it was kind of intimidating for me. And so that's why I didn't really run a whole lot of TTR races, because these guys were so intense, and I viewed them as the older generation. I'm just a teenager, and these guys are 25 to 35. And so the talent level, it was a bit intimidating.
We were very involved in road record keeping, road running, because he was the official record keeper for long distance track and road running. And we were actually monitoring the Olympic trials, for example, and we were responsible for clearing all the marks, making sure they were timed appropriately. That took up an awful lot of our time, and it became more and more time consuming because he was also a professor at the university and he had to teach. And the participation in the trail runs was just getting excitingly more and more runners just started showing up. And we just decided it was time to turn it over.
Then Gene and I, when we took over the series in 1990, we were mindful of the restrictions on competitive athletic events in wilderness areas, and we wanted the series to be more inclusive. We scaled back the competitive focus. I was not even going to keep track of times, but Gene thought that we should do that. Unfortunately, that means we have some gaps in our records because of and since then I've realized, if we didn't have a record of it, who would know?
I loved Bear Canyon, the course, the time element, and so very quickly it became my regular weekend run to do when nothing else was happening. I was never a hugely competitive runner, even on Bear, but as it turned out, I was hugely consistent over time. I started averaging 20 to 24 bears a year, and the distance was perfect. The timing was perfect. I could go out and do a Bear Canyon loop and then come back here and continue the rest of my day, starting at 9 or 10 o'clock. It was great. One of my favorite places used to be, still is a good place, used to be though, the basin, the creek crossing at the basin in the old days when it was just a meandering creek 10 or 12 feet across of rocks with water in the middle. And then in 1993, January or February, we had a huge flood and that whole creek bed got washed out. It's now 100 feet or more across. The big juniper tree that used to be in the middle, the sycamore trees are long gone. And that was a big hit. Everything was white, upturned rock.
In the original days when Bear Canyon Trail and Sabino Trail were in really good shape, there were enormous concrete pegs at the water crossings as you crisscrossed Bear. And I practiced getting across those series of pegs in as few steps as possible. And those pegs have all been destroyed by the floods, as Gene indicated. Where there used to be a nice trail section along the west side of the canyon, that's gone. You have to drop down and go around, and people are going to lose seconds there relative to what they could have done 30 or 40 years ago.
Kind of weird to think, just I've ran this for like 10 years and it's so much different than even when I first ran it. You know, lots of changes.
Headsplitter is the name for a sign that used to be at the intersection of the trail to Sycamore Canyon. The trail would go down then to Palisades and beyond to the basin, and you would be coming down from Top Out on the Bear Canyon Trail. And the reason it got the name Headsplitter was because your first view of it was edge on. And if you weren't paying attention, you'd hit it edge on. The Forest Service cut Headsplitter down because they had a policy change to change out the old signs. The area had become wilderness and put in wilderness trail signs. Because I was running it so much, by chance, I happened to be running Bear Canyon the day after they cut Headsplitter down. And for some unknown reason to me, they didn't haul it away that day. So I immediately drug it about 50 yards away, stashed it behind a plant. So I called the Forest Service, talked to the trail guy, and I said, you know, I saw a trail sign up there. It was cut off, it was just lying on the ground. If I go up and get it, can I have it? And the guy said, oh, wow, man. He said, we were wondering what happened to that thing. We came back to take it out and it wasn't there. And he said, sure, if you take it out of there, it's yours. So that following weekend, I went in with a backpack and stuck it in the pack. It barely fit. And it's probably, I don't know, maybe 70 or 80 pounds now, quarter-inch thick steel with the names of the trails and the distances cut out with a cutting torch. And it would survive a nuclear blast.
Started running it in '94, and apparently the trail had changed from the 80s to then. I remember coming back to the running shop and we were talking about the run, and Rob goes, well, I ran like an hour and a half back in the 1800s or something like that. Now, Rob said that he had run a lot faster back when. I'm like, dude, I don't know how you could do that because that course is hard. Like 7 switchbacks through the stream at the bottom. I'm super impressed. First of all, Thom Hunt's 140, 47, 48, something like that. That's just brutal no matter what the course is.
I have told people like Randy Accetta, when I was poking Randy to see if he could crack 2 hours, and Randy's significantly faster than I ever was. And I think it would take somebody a notch better. I was sort of the top of the second rank of male runners here in town. I usually finish in the top 10 in road races I turned up for. It would take a runner significantly faster than I was to crack 2, given the current conditions on Bear Canyon Loop, because there's too many places where you have to break stride.
Greg and I, as training partners, had qualified for the Olympic trial, so I'd run 2:19 probably ran right at that point like a 1:07 half marathon. I don't have a memory of trying to break 2 hours. I just have a memory of going to a TTR run and signing in. We started over by Sabino Canyon Road, and I had a pack of goods and it was chilly, and just getting out, and then within a mile or so, just like, well, let's go, and pushing pace. And I remember coming, just pushing pace and getting tired and pushing pace and thinking how beautiful it was. I wasn't trying to run fast that time, as we talked about it. But I do remember coming down the switchbacks like, this is hard, this is hard. And I remember running on the road, and at one point I'm like pushing pace. I'm like, oh, let's go run fast. And there was a lady in front of me, and she was like weaving. You know how these walkers just weave? And I remember wanting to scream, can't you see I'm running hard? But I didn't. I think I clipped her shoulder as I'm trying to hold a line, and I have no water or gel at this point or anything like that. Poor lady. And coming around the corner and then crossing the line and pretty much crying. And just seeing what it was, 2 hours something, 2:40 something. I moved here to go to graduate school, and I got a PhD in American Lit at the U of A, and I was studying the American West and literature about the West, and I was very influenced by Herman Melville, who was not the American West, Moby Dick, about the pursuit of things that will kill you, right? And then Cormac McCarthy, who also talks about things that will kill you. And so back when I started to write not just the Great American Running novel, but the Great American Novel, where I was trying to use running to describe what it means to be an American and use running to describe running to people who didn't know running. And the main character is a guy named Dalton, who had been a miler, a world-class miler, but never made the Olympics. He fell apart. He moved to Tucson for these reasons and those reasons and started running with a group of fellows, and each of them represents a type of American. One of the big scenes was him going and running Bear Canyon. And I described all the flora and fauna of Sabino Canyon, what it's like to splash through the creek and brush against cactus up against your calf as you're running past. He, on his own one morning, I think he'd broken up with a girlfriend or something like that, so he was ready to run. He just crushed it. I don't even know what he ran, but something 140 something. Probably tried to have him beat Tom Hunt's time. And then he says, dude, I'm in shape. And he goes and makes the Olympic team and becomes a hero. And that's the chapter in the book about Bear Canyon.
I was up running 50 miles and started to gear up for a 100-mile run. And more than once, twice I think I did this, I ran a week of bears. Every day I'd get up and go run Bear Canyon. I was never a huge mileage runner. Those were my longest weeks. What was it, 119 miles or something like that. The 2 weeks that I ran every day for a week were just, and they were separate. They were 2 different years. They were just incredible weeks to me. And I loved being out there. A later change was the 2003 fire, and we were actually excluded from the canyon for almost a year. That bummed me out because I wanted to see the changes as our trail came back. The flood of 2006 was probably the biggest thing to ever happen up there. The debris flows that we now see never existed on that mountain range. There are now over 240 of them, named and numbered. The people that study those things never were able to study one locally. Now they have 240 plus. The road itself got totally obliterated. And the Forest Service has a policy of not being able to close something officially until they generate a letter. I knew that letter was coming on Monday, so I went up before that letter came out on Sunday and had my mind blown. I thought they'd never open the road again. There were rocks half the size of my house in the road, and I thought they'd just make a trail through and around all that stuff. There was little pavement left in sections. It was just incredible. But lo and behold, money and big equipment can make things happen, and it did.
And actually, was going backpacking in the Rincon Mountains. We were on a 3-day backpacking trip, Lisa and I, and this trail runner goes by the first day. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I could see myself doing that someday. And then the next day we're going up and we're almost to Micah, and the same guy comes by again. And I was like, holy, like, that's awesome. So I stopped him and I was like, how are you doing this? Like, how do you carry enough water? I just like grilled him, peppered him with a ton of questions. So he was my introduction to long distance trail running. And so then I started exploring the trails by running instead of hiking, and just absolutely fell in love with it.
The first day I did it, I'll never forget that first time I wanted a win TTR. The first day I was there, I was like, I wanted to show these guys that like I'm fast and stuff. And this other guy, Doug, who used to be a part of TTR, he was a good runner. And I kind of stuck with him, and then he kind of dropped me on the tram road, and I ran a 2:29 that day. And I was pretty stoked, and it seemed like everybody else was like, yeah, that's pretty fast, you know, your first time out here.
When I first moved to Tucson, I heard about the Tucson Trail Runners. I didn't know much about the trail running scene here until I linked up with them, and I think it was probably the first longer trail run I went on was the Bear Canyon Loop. I was just told that it's the quintessential trail run around here. It's a great distance. It's a long run, but it's not too long.
Late October 2014 is when I did my 500th bear. That was a big thing for me. I didn't know how big until I did it.
I've had a lot of great experiences on it. It's such a beautiful loop, and it offers a lot of different types of running on the loop. I'd say the best experience I had on it was around this time of the year. I was running in the winter on a rainy day, and right after the top out, and you hit a little spine where you're kind of up top before you drop back down, I turned a corner and ran right into a mountain lion who was about 25, 30 feet away, and I think I scared the crap out of it, and it scared the crap out of me, and we both stood there for maybe 10 seconds, and then it bolted up the side of the canyon, and I just left there. I may have soiled myself, but that was the closest, most intense experience I've ever had with wildlife. And so every time I pass that spot on Bear Canyon Loop, I always think of that and turning the corner and seeing that mountain lion.
I was doing some backpacking in the Mica Mountains, and I ran into some guys running up the Mica Mountain, or doing the Mica Mountain Marathon, and I was just really like taken aback in terms of who are these crazy people doing a marathon with like 7,000, almost 8,000 feet of game. So I started talking to them a little bit and got personally invited by some of them to the following weekend's run. It wasn't until that fall that I did my first Bear Canyon Loop, but that is definitely one of the most well-known and best routes to really get a feel for this area and what desert running is like, because you got the low desert with all the cacti, saguaros, and then you got the high desert grasslands.
I think when this started, this whole sub 2 hour attempt started becoming known, I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. In the last couple of TTR runs of Bear Canyon Loop, I was like, oh, I'll go hard. And it ended up, I was running by myself. And so, you know, kind of starting to get the time points of where you had to be at a certain time. And my first time, I think it was 2:03, 2:04. And the next year, I'm like, oh, I think I can drop, maybe get close to 2 hours. And again, I was running by myself, and I was like, oh, I really could use some stiff competition right now. Keep myself in the race, more or less. It came close. 2:02, I believe, was the time. Just to shave a minute or two off was really difficult.
When I was asked to do this, I couldn't really say no because, like, for one, I owe it to TTR and to Bear Canyon Loop itself to, like, give myself a challenge because I've gained so much from both of those.
What made me want to do this is because it's that quintessential loop, and then the fact that no one's gone sub 2 in, what is it, like 30 years or something like that. It just seems like a really fun project. We've always talked about it for years. We've talked about going sub 2 on BCL, but the timing's just never been right to do such a hard effort on a pretty technical course, and the conditions aren't always right.
Temperature-wise, the fact that it hasn't rained and there's not a lot of overgrowth, I think this is probably like the best time to do this, actually. Everything's lining up.
I think this year with COVID and a lot of races being canceled, and also the races that are taking place not quite being the same type of race atmosphere that we're used to, this just fits in as an awesome project that we can do out of our back door. It's super motivating. I'm treating it like a race. I'm going to taper for it.
They're up against a really, really big challenge. I strongly encourage them to practice speed, and more speed. Not on the trail, on the flat. They need to do lots and lots and lots of speed work and then use that on the trail to help them out. You know, when I was doing those sub 2 hour bears, I was racing every weekend. I was running 10Ks at sub 5:30 pace, you know, every other week. And you got to have that leg speed. In the 21st century, bear is not what it was. It's a more rugged course. There's more breaks, there's more washouts. There's places where you have to go around things.
I think it would be well worth anyone's time who's trying to maximize their pace to go and think about all of these sections and think about how you're going to negotiate each one.
Every place that you have to break stride matters.
Yeah.
Every step, every second.
I enjoyed, I think you just have to have fun out on the trails. You know what I mean? You got to be out there and get a kick out of being there and doing it and just enjoying, you know, that type of running to me was very, very important.
So these guys are living out my fictional Dalton success. So I hope the boys go get it because they'll be a better hero in real life than my novel hero is.
I feel pretty healthy. I had a few good weeks. A little beat up from work right now. I've been working a lot, but I feel good. I mean, I cannot complain because I don't have any aches and pains. I have kind of peaked and had a little taper here now in the next week or so. So I think I'll be fresh going into it, and I'll definitely give it everything.
I've been working on the uphill running. That's not been a strength. The last 2-3 weeks haven't been great for my training necessarily. I actually ended up getting married, went on a honeymoon. The training has taken a little bit of a back seat. It'll be interesting to really see what I'm capable of next week.
So going into this, if this was 1 year ago, I would have said I was 100% confident I could do this. Right now, I wouldn't say my fitness is at its best level, and my confidence isn't at its best level. I'm coming off an ankle injury, which was about 6 months ago, which was also the last time I ran as hard as I could on technical trails. The hard part for me, I think, is going to be just navigating the technical terrain and just trying to be confident on my ankle. We'll see how that goes. I'm hoping I could just get in that flow state where I'm looking 10 feet ahead of me and not thinking about it too much, but that hasn't happened in a long time, so we'll see.
Especially with a group of guys out there and people taking pictures of them, how can you not run fast? If they don't break 2 hours, shame on them.
Don't put that in there.
You get up, you focus, you keep going, and I did crack 2 hours that time. Every step matters. This trail, you know, we talked about it, it's slower than it was 40 years ago. For two of you weren't even born the last time. So
Make sure the boys start at Sabino Canyon Road. None of this east side of the parking lot stuff. That doesn't count.
You gonna give us a countdown, Ross?
Go! Woo-hoo! That was not much of a countdown.
You need to run very fast at the start on the flats because you can't make up the time on the uphill.
I think if you want to shave time off, you got to run that first mile, which is pretty much flat, even slightly downhill. You got to just crush that, because that's a good way to shave some time.
Even that climb up the road in the beginning of the run is just like, I don't want to die after this little climb a mile into the run.
Use that road to get to the trail as efficiently as possible without overdoing it on the road. And then once you get on the trail, things start to space out and spread out.
And then once you get up into the trailhead and you start up to Seven Falls, it's kind of a steady grind where you're trying to get through the washes as efficiently as you can.
About a half mile past Seven Falls, you're gaining a lot of elevation, and as you're transitioning almost from the lower Bear Canyon to the upper Bear Canyon, you can look back and see Seven Falls and literally all the switchbacks that you just kind of ran up, and you get a whole view of the lower Bear Canyon.
The switchbacks up to the top are good. They're very runnable. That's a nice section.
Morning, dude. Good job. Go, 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 go.
You get to the top of this really hard climb, the hardest climb of the whole loop, and you can look back and see Thimble Peak and a beautiful view of Tucson. There's an overlook. I like to think of it like it's the Lion King Pride Rock. But if you can get to that point in under 1 hour, you're in good shape if you can crush the rest of it. But if you're a few minutes over that, there's a very slim chance of going sub 2. So it's really 1 hour at the top out. That's what I'll be shooting for. And if I'm within a minute or two of that, I think there's a good chance if all goes well.
On a good day on Ware, I used to depend on getting to the top in just over an hour, or close to an hour, and then coming down in less than an hour.
The climbs are probably going to always be about the same. I just want to try to get to the downhill stuff without like completely blowing up. Favorite part is after you top out, drop into East Fork and get all that downhill, and after all that climbing, it's just, you feel like you're just flying.
The biggest thing for me when I ran fast that day was I let go and kind of ran that downhill a little bit more than what I would normally do. That's the key to really running fast, and is taking advantage of those downhill portions. If I'm doing that for training, I'm not going that hard down there. And I guess if I was truly racing, I would have really, pushed. But I did let it go a little bit more. And people that really race on the trails, I mean, I know people that's their focus. They are much more adept at feeling comfortable, racing like that. Like I said, I always had a little bit of caution to make sure that I wasn't getting hurt.
I just would let loose there. And that was where I got my times from, my good times, because I didn't run as fast uphill, but that downhill, I just followed Ken's principles of looking ahead, seeing what was on the trail, and just would take off.
Like when you're coming down from the ridge to the basin, it's just an incredibly risky section of trail.
It was one of the areas that first started to deteriorate, and that section, when I started having to break stride, it was, there might not be any more sub 2 hour times.
Once you turn onto West Fork, the downhill, I think from there on, it's extremely fun for me. My strengths tailored more to downhill running, technical terrain. So from there on out, it's generally a fun day if I haven't, gone out too fast.
And now that John and others have done so much trail work to kind of clear it out, and unfortunately it hasn't been raining, that you can really bomb that downhill. And I get so much adrenaline out of that. I love it.
Something very specific happened that week after my pre-race interview when I pretty much had zero confidence that I was going to be able to do this. Just the day after that interview, I went for a long run, specifically on a trail that was a lot more technical than Bear Canyon Loop, out on the west side of Tucson, really rocky trail, with the whole purpose of doing a 3-mile tempo downhill. I needed to get over this if this was even going to be possible. So I went out, I did 10 miles, and I wanted to be a little tired going into this downhill stretch on technical section, and then I started it, and it immediately went horribly. And I was moving really slow and really clunky, and I was getting really frustrated. So I stopped on the trail, and I literally just started shaking. I shook myself because I'm like, I gotta loosen up. Like, I'm way too uptight. I'm way too rigid trying to run downhill, and I'm just trying to remember, like, how did I used to feel when I would run downhill really fast and find that flow state. So I just loosened up and I took some deep breaths, and then, okay, a big thing was to look ahead of me and not look straight down. So I started back up again and then just slowly started putting my gaze further in front of me until it was locked in about 10 feet out. And then I start slowly running with my gaze 10 feet out, and then trusting what I saw 10 feet out was still there underneath my feet when it hit it without having to look at my feet. And then slowly I started running faster and faster and faster with my gaze 10 feet out until I was running fast. It was really exciting, and I started going crazy, and I started smiling and saying, oh my God, I'm doing it, I'm doing it. And I crushed it for 3 miles. My buddy Andrew had run a slightly different variation but was out that day, and I caught up with him and I was ecstatic. I'm like, dude, I just had a breakthrough. I had my breakthrough. And I was flying downhill and I was looking 10 feet out. And for the first time in about a year, I felt like I was having fun running downhill, and that's always been what the whole point was for me, is to just find that flow state where you're having fun and not thinking and just looking ahead and moving quickly.
I think the thing that's a key is you have some places, like I know that upper Sabino area, where you have to get a little technical over rocks, and I don't think that's changed because those probably haven't changed that much. And that is the biggest area where you have to just be technical is the rock things.
And even the section from basin to the asphalt, it's very highly technical. And your legs are starting to get tired at this point, and you're getting physically tired and mentally tired. And so if mistakes are going to be made, that's probably the section that's going to be made on.
When you're in that state where you feel like you can't get injured and every footstep is very sure of itself, I don't know how to describe that, but it's like I know I'm not going to get injured when I find that state and I'm moving as fast as I can and looking ahead and not even thinking about it. Like injuries aren't even really on my radar at that point, and sure enough, like it was smooth.
I think the hardest part of that run is climbing out of Sabino Basin. It's like up and down, and really rocky and technical before you get on the tram road.
In order to go sub 2, you really need to take a lot of risk. You wouldn't do on your normal training run. I mean, when I would do it, I remember my legs would just beat up, my ankles were sore. You just can't avoid the hazards, and so you're probably gonna fall a couple times. Twist ankles is pretty much a given. You can't get through it without twisting an ankle multiple times on the trail.
I think on that run, you got to be ready to get the switchbacks fast, and then you got to take advantage of the downhill on the backside and be ready to run the pave. That's the hard part. I had the course record on the Sabino Canyon race, going up and then down the road, and that road will kill you. So you got to be ready for that road. If their quads are good on that road, they can roll, they'll be good.
When I hit the tram road, I was ecstatic. I think I zoomed to probably a 440 pace as soon as I hit the tram road because there was a bunch of people there cheering. I looked at my watch. I saw that I had almost 25 minutes. And so I knew for sure, not only did I have it, but I could beat it by quite a bit. And also you're done with the technical trails and the intense focus as soon as you hit the tram road. And so it's kind of this relief when you hit it. And yeah, it just felt cathartic to hit the tram road and start flying down it.
The last half a mile or so on the trail above the road.
Coming down the switchback.
From
the junction with phone line.
There's some tricky places. I remember in the early days, I knew which rock I was going to hit with which foot, and it just worked.
And you just got to tear down that road as fast as you can.
It's nice when you're running the Bear Canyon to have a little cushion, so that way if you're a little bit beat up from the trail, you can ease back. And the good thing about Bear Canyon, when you hit the top, you know exactly what the calculation is. You know what your mile pace needs to be. It's a very quick calculation in your head. Like when I was doing it, I knew I had to run 6:15 to come down. That's all I needed, that's all I wanted.
I actually slightly dialed it back because I was worried about like cramping or some sort of weird issue with going way too hard on the tram road when I knew I already had it.
Good, Charlie!
Charlie was way faster than I thought he'd be. I told Angela after they left, and I didn't want to tell it to them, that I didn't think anybody could do it. Gene didn't either. I thought maybe they could get under 2:10 based on the time. I looked up their times, and maybe somebody could go under 2:05, but going under 2 on this course and this day, Charlie not only went under 2, he went under 2 in a time that would have been credible back in the heyday when Ken made this an intensely competitive run. He did a time that would have won most of the Bear Canyon loops that were held in the late 70s and the early 80s. He did a time that is one of the top times ever. It sets various records for semi-old people because he's 35 running this thing. It was just a remarkable accomplishment.
I was just so psyched. There was a bunch of people there, so it just made it really special. I wasn't really expecting that. There would be people cheering me on at the end, and it just seemed like a really special moment for me and part of the community, and just being part of that community that came together for something that seems so niche and a little ridiculous, but really means a lot to a lot of us trail runners. And I was surprised, to be honest. I was really surprised that I was able to go sub 2 and be able to run a 156 and some change.
Oh, I'm tired. Thanks, guys. I felt really good. I felt like I really got in the zone. Yeah, it was awesome. I was just rocking and rolling. It felt awesome. So fun having everybody out there.
I thought at best that it'd be close.
I didn't think I'd even be able to do it.
But I mean, you had margin for error.
Where's Kent at? He might go sub 2 too.
And then Kent was not too far behind and ran a very, very credible 2:02:21 with an effort that would probably have been a sub 2 back when the trail was in better shape. So he did very, very well.
That was a lot faster than you thought you could run, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
A little bit fatigued. It was, you know, high heart rate pretty much the whole time. I'm 30 years, Charlie Ware's freaking, what is he, like 35? I'm young, so I've got a couple of years, yeah, I definitely think I can do it.
Sion ran a time for a guy who's 40 that is very, very respectable.
It was brutal from the very beginning. I actually wanted to stop as I started to climb out of the, towards Seven Falls. I was like, God, I'm not going to be able to do this. Once I hit the switchbacks above Seven Falls, I got my legs back, and I was able to like kind of just tell myself I'm just going to grind it no matter what.
So it was a remarkable morning, and the other runners that were out there clearly loved the event.
I knew I probably had it at the top out. So at the Thimble Peak top out, which is where I told myself if I can get there around 1 hour, if I hammer from there, and I'm really typically good at downhills, then I have a good chance of getting it, but it'll be close. It's going to be really close. But I got to that top out in just a little under 57, and so I knew, whoa, okay, I got a little bit of a buffer. It loosened me up. I thought the pressure could go both ways. It could make me really doubt myself, or if I have a rough patch, or if I don't sleep good the night before. Just having the pressure of trying to go sub 2, having this very specific time that I needed to hit. But it turns out it was great, and I liked having the pressure. When I arrived that day, I was psyched. I was just like, I cranked music on the way out there, and I was just like in such a good mood, and I felt like I can do this. And I treated it like a race, like it had that race atmosphere in my mind. It was not your typical TTR run. And I do acknowledge that being a big help, especially nowadays where TTR runs are you just kind of go out and it's more of a social event. And we would go hard. I've gone hard on a lot of TTR runs, but I've never gone balls to the wall hard and tapered. I've never tapered for a TTR run, and I did taper a bit for this. It's a different ballgame when you treat it like a race, which was kind of fun because from what I understand, they treated it like a race back in the day, and there was guys coming from all over the state and they threw down.
And now that these guys have unmasked themselves for the athletes that they can be, we have several more runs in the series that have not had good times set on them in decades, and I want them out there trying their best, and I want to see some other good times. That's the challenge I'm laying down.
I'm thinking that down the road there's going to be more people that are going to be running sub 2 from here on out. There's plenty of fast trail runners in town. That would be my hope, is that other fast runners will take the challenge.
It really wasn't in the peak period of my training for this. A lot of speed work I did in the fall paid off, and I felt it. I don't think I'll ever have the speed that Thom Hunt had. I think I could run over fast technical terrain as good as he could, but the guy set the American 10K record 3 weeks after he set that record, and I've never even run a 10K. That type of speed, I think you'd need a different caliber athlete to break his record. Do I think I can go faster? I do. When I looked at it rationally, I feel like I could maybe shave 3 minutes off, which wouldn't put me where I need to be to break the record. But who knows? I didn't think I could go sub 2. My PR on the course was a 2:08, and I was able to do a 1:56 and change. So I wouldn't rule it out, but I do think that somebody could.
There wasn't any gear. We all ran in cotton socks, cotton t-shirts, and nobody carried water. For Bear Canyon, nobody carried water. The first water thing that came out was a thing called a liquid pack, and I think Ross was probably the first to show up with one of those, but I don't know that he ever carried it on Bear, or certainly not in his fastest times.
I went to Bob's Bargain Barn, and they had these quart bottles with a little loop, and we would run, all of us. But Ken didn't believe in drinking water. I think Ross has probably told you that too. He just didn't carry water, or if he did, or he didn't and he got thirsty, he'd just drink out of streams. But the rest of us would carry these plastic water bottles with red tops. And, you know, we used to joke that after a while we'd probably, you know, start leaning over naturally. But so we shift them off.
If I was only going 2.5 hours like that, I probably wasn't ever carrying any water. I would go to Dairy Queen afterwards and make sure that I reloaded.
No, we never carried anything.
As far as shoes went, for a long period of time, everybody was running in Mizunos. And there was a particular shoe, the 450, that was the trail shoe. But until the 450 came out, or if you didn't have the wherewithal to get a new pair of 450s, you ran in whatever the street shoe was.
No, I didn't carry water. No, we didn't carry water, just took a pack of goo. I remember that one run in particular, I had one pack of goo. Back then, goo had a flavor called Totally Naked, before you got in trouble for being naked, I guess. And so I remember having that tucked in my shorts, but no, I didn't carry any water or anything like that.